I am starting the live stream now.
Okay.
All right, it looks like our live stream has started. Please note everybody in the meeting, I will have Naya drop down in the chat at the end of the meeting a link onto our YouTube channel where you can view present and past coalition meetings. Okay, looks like we're still waiting on a captioner. It seems like we have some technical difficulties going on.
The DDAR programs, there are like a couple, like exactly as Sheila described, a couple of specific services that we
Carla, you went on mute.
Oh, okay. Oh, so sorry. Looks like there are some technical difficulties happening with our captioner. So what we're gonna do is unfortunately for the time being, if you do have an accessibility need to use the captions, I'll go over some different options that we can provide. As soon as a live captioner is available, I will go ahead and add them into this meeting. So bear with us briefly. Okay. So hello everybody and thank you for joining us today. If we haven't met yet, my name is Carla Leon and I am a program coordinator at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. I have been with CFILC for about 11 months now and I will be assisting and moderating today's meeting. For accessibility purposes, there are a couple of different options that you can go to. First off, if you would like to access captionings, you can go to the meeting controls on the bottom of your screen and select the CC icon titled Live Transcript. This is currently unavailable as we wait for our live captioner. So in the meantime, you can go ahead and click on CC Captions and Zoom will auto-populate their captions. Admittedly, they are not the best, but we will have a captioner joining us soon. I just got the email. So when that does happen, I will go ahead and drop in a stream text link. I will go ahead and drop that about every 15 minutes. That is a great option for you to use because you can click on show subtitles and gain access to captioning, which you can use to change font size, color, or make the captioning full screen. I will go ahead and add that momentarily. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to June to go ahead and get you all started. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay, thanks, Carla. And we apologize for this pitch hitting on the captioning. But the good news is, although the AI Zoom captioning is far from perfect, it does seem to have improved quite a bit over the last year or so. So we'll get the live captioner up ASAP. So any problems, you need me to repeat something, please feel free to stop me and so it's accessible and clear. And Carla will let us know as soon as you'll see the switch to live screen text. So I'm June Tales, and I'm a disability policy consultant and contractor with CFILC, and the California Disaster Coalition. So I'm the organizer and the host of these emergency policy and practice discussions. So we ask that if you're able to please introduce yourself in chat, your organization, where you're located, city and state. And in terms of comments and questions, if you have a comment to make in chat, please do. And if just kind of preface it with the word comment, colon. And if you have a question, preface it with question, colon. That way, as I scan chat, I'll be able to locate your questions really quickly. So just a brief review of future calls. And just a reminder, they're always at the same time, the second Thursday of the month, 10:30 Pacific. In July, we have an update and discussion regarding how California independent living centers provide power-dependent people with resources and other needs during planned and unplanned power outages. So we're looking at things like planning, like go kits, like backup batteries, hotel accommodations, transportation, food, and gas. And Allie Pelsmer, the DAR manager, will be our guest presenter in July. In August, we have a discussion on hybrid meetings and conferences. So we'll look at those issues, why they are important, some of the accessibility elements. What does that take? What are the budget issues? What are the incremental steps? And what are the lessons that our panel can apply and more? And the panel for August is Katie Marquitas, the Access and Functional Needs Coordinator in Colorado, and Tim Mann, her colleague, as well as Shaylin Suzelis, co-executive director of the partnership. Just a reminder, put a poll up toward the end of the call to get your feedback, because that's real important to us. And you can also put your feedback in chat as well. Any aha experience you've had, or what additional kinds of topics you'd like us to consider covering in the future. So today we are looking at is being at the table enough, and really taking a deeper look at this to explore and discuss the joiner side of community engagement. And this includes our roles in committees, advisory boards, task forces, work groups, subcommittees, and really looking at how do we hold ourselves accountable for these activities. I'll offer some beginning thoughts to ignite the discussion, maybe make you angry, maybe not, but we need to focus on clarity regarding what is our motivations, how do we guard against tokenism, how do we evaluate the worth of what we're doing and measure our success and more. So I'll start by reviewing what are my core beliefs and values in this area, and discussion about motivation. Why say yes when asked to participate? And a look at the ROI, which is the return on the investment, the cost and the time involved, and really evaluating it, again, impact and outcomes. I'll mention some of the flexibilities and involvement options that are important, and accountability issues that help to maximize effectiveness. And then over to you for a real, hopefully robust discussion regarding your insights. So first, my values and my core beliefs in this area. I believe that one thing you can't recycle is wasted time. Our time is really valuable. And also, one thing that someone said to me once that resonates for me a lot: when we die, our inbox will still be full, which means we'll never be able to do everything. So we got to tackle our highest priorities, because when we're gone, our inbox will still be full. I won't be covering the convener and sponsor side of community engagement. That's for another day, another discussion, but I will post two important resources that begin to cover this, and I'll do that in chat as soon as I'm done with some of these remarks. So in terms of motivation and the cost and time, the investment, some of what I say may be seem really obvious to you, but if this were really the case, these practices would occur more often, and fewer of us, including myself, would sometimes go on autopilot and put up with processes that could be more efficient and effective. So one of the things I'm going to ask you all to be ready to discuss, what is your criteria for saying yes? Well, how do you prevent what I call being a victim of the seduction syndrome? And that means, oh, I'm so flattered that you asked me. How could I say no? Really be on guard about that seduction syndrome and be very clear about your motivations. So some of my motivations are, maybe I want to get to know the organization better. Maybe I believe in its mission and its goals. And I want to focus on advocacy issues that I know the organization cares about and is important to me. Plus, I want to work with some of the people involved. Now, as a consultant, for well over, 4 decades now, I need to be skilled at really projecting and protecting the value and cost of my time. How much pro bono, that is volunteer, non-compensated time I can give. I was masterful at underestimating the time involved in projects. So I really had to work on this issue. For example, a 2 to 3 hour meeting at the Capitol in California, which is Sacramento, equaled 18 hours commitment when I calculated airplane and ground transportation and limited flight choices. And COVID, I think, helped me to even be more mindful of how I analyze my time. For example, an 11 or 12-hour advisory meeting over a day and a half takes a very conservative estimate of approximately 14 hours of commuting time when I calculate the time for scheduling and waiting for ground transportation, planes, and then if there were screw-ups, and you all know what the screw-ups are, bad weather, delays, mechanical for the airplane, flight cancellations, mishandling of my scooter, traffic gridlock, you know the drill. Over the years, I've actually had to develop some tools to help me be more mindful, realistic, and evaluating, really employing strategies regarding the true time and dollar costs of these engagements. And I believe this is something that many of us don't spend enough time analyzing, these sometimes very hidden elements. For example, logistics, sometimes you have to finalize a contract. Sometimes you have to complete forms and approvals and planning and logistic calls. And then there's preparation, there's reading the background materials. And then there's travel and commute time, the driving, the parking, the waiting, the ground transportation, all of that, the delays. And then there's the trip planning that I always underestimated, which is the researching, scheduling, buying, and reconfirming tickets, hotels, ground transportation, et cetera. And then there's the packing and unpacking. I always, before COVID, kept the suitcase packed, but I still had to deal with the clothes and the paper and all that other stuff. And most of all, what I call the dreaded billing and getting reimbursed. You know, it's like the stuff I hated the most: compiling receipts, dealing with lost receipts, complying with different per diem rules, submitting, and then sometimes having to resubmit because their rules were different than my rules. So you probably all know that as well. And before COVID, I actually had an employee part-time that did a lot of this for me, but now I'm doing it myself and it is not fun. So I ask you, how do you evaluate the impact? Think about your impact. I want to hear from you about this. How do you measure success, and is your time worth it? So I think one thing we probably don't do enough of is scheduling regular personal and group commitment checkups. Checkups consisting of like rethinking and reassessing. Are we still on track? Are we making progress? Or have we plateaued? Are we backsliding? Is it time to pivot? Or how are we measuring our outcomes, our impacts, and our successes, and tracking it? And, you know, the gold standard is, are our targeted outcomes being achieved? So another tool I created over the years and continue to refine is a little tool I call, is it worth it? So I ask myself questions before I go and after I go. And 6 months later, and the 6-month mark is if I remember to do this. So I rate things from 1 to 5, 5 being high, 5 being best. Is it worth it? Does it inform my current work, my advocacy, goals, and new learning? Does it strengthen my contacts, my network, time with subject matter experts, with mentors? Does it cultivate existing new collaboration, partners, projects, maybe even funding? And one thing I don't laugh, but I always also rated, does it allow me time with my friends? That was always important too. It'll allow me valuable time with my friends. So the big question was at the end of this list, what am I saying no to if I'm not saying yes? What am I saying no to if I'm not saying yes? In other words, what important work or events am I missing because I'm choosing to be involved? What is the effect of not working on something? So a little bit about participation options. You know, participating. I found myself constantly advocating for groups, avoiding, solely using that cookie cutter approach of in-person meetings once a month or once a quarter. And I found myself advocating for richer two-way communication instead of being talked at or talked to. Advocating for hybrid meetings as a must-do versus a can-do. And advocating for targeted smaller work groups to get to some of the harder and deeper work that needed to be done. So again, in our discussion, I want to ask you, what have you all advocated for to make your community engagement more meaningful, more impactful, and more outcome-oriented? So also for me, in thinking about accountability issues and maximizing effectiveness, A non-negotiable was always attending the access and accommodation needs. You really, that was just a must do. But also holding the sponsors accountable for follow-up with minutes, with requested information, with reports, and with requested speakers. And also really careful recruitment of who's qualified to serve on the particular group we're talking about. Being deliberate and specific about recruiting people and never saying, well, so-and-so has a disability, so they can talk for everybody who happens to have a disability. So a commitment to a real cross-disability representation and not just one person who tokenistically could represent all people and their different lived experiences. So cross-disability, including disability-led, governed, and managed organizations that were community-based and non-governmental organizations for and of and by and with people who live with and identify with a disability versus just organizations that are about people with disabilities. And also what I often wanted, but often didn't get was a good orientation to the group, a mutual orientation, two-way, not just the sponsor telling us about their goals, their mission, but us sharing with them our diverse perspectives, our values, our core beliefs, and really doing a mutual sharing, and which meant translating our sacred jargon like emergency ease, healthcare ease, community ease, nonprofit ease, government ease, into kind of language that we all could understand, and insisting that we define the terms and abbreviations. So one of my real pet peeves has been the need for two-way communication versus stock presentations, that is, having speakers talk to us instead of with us. So I was often part of groups where I value, we would interrupt speakers that would just go on and on with our questions, because questions are always the most important part. So I've learned over the years that it's important to submit questions ahead of time for presenters to answer, be prepared to answer. So we really have like a problem-solving focus that starts with identifying, what are the questions? What are the specific solutions we want to work on? In other words, this involves setting a mutual agenda and not having the agenda set for us. And in terms of, again, involvement options, really looking at using the diversity of methods to broaden our feedback loops and the opinions and the perspectives and the lived experiences by engaging more people that go beyond that classic in-person meeting, face-to-face interaction. Not that that's not valuable and the easiest way to build working relationships, but it does leave out those who do not have the time, the resources, the health, or other abilities to commute. So classic in-person ongoing meetings should not be the only option. We need to target other options, focus groups, work groups, and hybrid meetings, crowdsourcing. And I personally have a real problem with public hearings and listening sessions. Why? Because they're often only one way. They capture broad input, but people with good ideas often avoid these hearings and listening sessions because they're often very time intensive, intimidating, tedious, and sometimes require for public hearings written statements. And sometimes that yawn factor, the boring factor, is significant. And discussion is limited, or there is no discussion, which means no options to explore issues in depth. And these are often perceived, at least the public hearings and the listening sessions, as kind of one and done, check the box. And the feedback goes into an engagement black hole. And they also often lack virtual attendance and remote participation. So hopefully, post-COVID, we'll never have a state legislature say to us, well, you can't testify unless you're here in person. I mean, we have to all say that that's no longer an acceptable response from an organization or a legislature. So we also have to constantly guard against the many forms of tokenism. And I bet all of you have been involved in a group where the staff turns over and that's used as an excuse for all things kind of stop for a while. So that one of many examples of kind of, I think, one of many elements of tokenism. So I'll end with this quote. Accessibility, and by that I mean physical equipment, programmatic, and communication access. Accessibility is being able to get in the building and everything else I mentioned. Diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having a voice at the table, and belonging is having your voice heard at the table. So on to you all. I'll put these questions in chat. You can raise your hands, you can make comments in chat. I think there's already, so I'll be looking at chat. But share your tips. What is your criteria for saying yes? How and when do you evaluate or reevaluate your impact, your return on investment? And what have you advocated for to make your engagement more meaningful, impactful, and outcome-oriented? So over to you all to raise your hand, put things in chat, ask questions. And I'll get chat up here so I can see it. Todd, your hand's up.
Hey, June. Thanks for doing this. This is Todd. This is an incredibly powerful thing for all of us, independent living disability rights, and all our peers to be able to really master what you're talking about. And I think the relationship building is so important. We say it all the time, but to actually quantify, how valuable it is to have that seat at the table. And then, as you have very well pointed out, that we can't just always say yes. And to me, that's an area where we've talked in the past about forced multiplication, getting other people who have a voice like we do to maybe take that place at the table or join us to eventually maybe replace us so that we can increase capacity. What do you think about that? Is that something that you think is doable, or should we focus on just prioritizing which table we're at?
I think all of this is multi-complex. I mean, that was a big question. So I don't know if I'm going to address it all, but certainly I do value who is at the table because those relationships are really priceless. And I also value, there's the newer people at the table and our responsibility to help them come up to speed, to sit next to them, to do a little mentoring, to say, you might not understand all of this, but this is a place where you can ask questions for anything that's not understood, to make it safe, to make it real. I don't know, Todd, did I get everything you asked? Let's see.
Yeah, this is Todd, June. You have, and you and I've had these conversations before. I'm just trying to, again, when it comes to that first multiplication, having people that you see are well versed in what you're being asked to talk about or join an advisory group for. I think that that's something that I'm trying to do more of and feel more comfortable in trying to use diplomacy as well as advocacy.
Yeah, and you make the point. Our bench can be a little slim at times, and so I think we don't have to say yes to everything, but we can say, I can't do this, but maybe Todd would be open to doing this, or Rebecca would be open to doing this. It doesn't always have to be us or me or you. We need to share the responsibility, but we also need to share the responsibility to communicate back to the people we work with, like what is going on if we're representing people in a group, to bring back what is going on, when we're not under some kind of do not disclose agreement. So, hey, Carolyn, I see your hand up.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, June. This is an extremely important conversation and one that we often grapple with internally. Our center operates over 9 counties and 13 different grant lines. So capacity is often a huge challenge for us, and where we divide our attentions is extremely important. One of the elements that we always address, as you have touched on, is the value of the relationship on the end game. So we look at our mission, we look at our vision, we look at what we are already required to do by grant line contract and by core service as a Center for Independent Living. And then we rank that, because everything that we have time to give our attention to is already a priority. We're not dealing with a cross-section of our population where we have time to spend our energies on elements that aren't critical. So when you are, and I'm sure everyone here can relate to that, what we do is already a priority. So what we look at in the bottom line are some of the elements that you mentioned. What is the actual cost of participation? If we send our team member, for example, from Reading to Sacramento because it's a critical meeting from a politically strategic standpoint, we're now looking at an overnight trip and 7 hours on the road. Is the bottom line dollar for our grant line capacity worth that 7 hours? Is there enough of a relationship being built to where we will find continuity long-term for the causes that service our community most effectively and efficiently? So this is something that we constantly revisit. It's a regular part of our executive level conversations at the Disability Action Center, because we want our time and energy to go towards the main cause. And we feel it's a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that those grant lines are paying for the ultimate end game.
So, Carolyn, I've learned a lot from you over the months about, rural life, because I'm an urban animal. And so one thing I want to ask you about what you said is that's a very long commute for a staff person. And I'm wondering if after the relationships are built, or maybe even before, are there options for hybrid participation, remote, virtual?
That's an excellent question, and another one that is a constant point of conversation in our area. There's a lot of talk about the gap when it comes to having the digital divide. And literally, we sit in a region. My camera's off because of that digital divide, June, to be honest. And I am triple tasking today. It's like, in order to be on this meeting, which I felt was important for participation, I'm camera off to keep connectivity, and also camera off because I'm working on something else at the same time in order to be here. So that digital divide truly does exist. We've done the numbers in our Northern Territory. 23% of our territory has no connectivity. So that means 1 out of 5, almost 1 out of 4 individuals that you want to connect with would not be able to have a virtual presence anyway. So that makes it even more critical that we make those hard decisions and base them on what is the end result and contribution to our community. Does it bring greater service to our community? Does it bring greater value to our presence and collaborative energies out there in our community? That's the only way we can judge it, because sometimes we have no choice. Sometimes we have to make that hard decision to spend the money and show up on the doorstep.
Carolyn, how do you evaluate that afterwards? When the staff person comes back, what do you do? How do you?
That's an excellent question. And often it depends on the grant line, what we do, but I can tell you there is a rigorous process at the executive level to examine, for example, the materials that come back from an event. So when our staff person, our team member goes out, especially long distance, for example, we have gone down to Southern California. We weighed out the collaborative relationship of it to the cost. And we were actually the first independent living center this year to actually have an exhibitor's booth at the C4A convention in Glendale. But it was a strategic move related to our relationships and the master plan for aging and the building of an aging and disability resource connection. So again, we take each opportunity and say, is this something that's going to bring us closer to the bonds and long-term relationships that will strengthen our end initiatives in this northern rural territory? Because collaboration is everything. If you're never seen out there, then how do you build the relationship? So it is an individualized evaluation, looking at, okay, we were there, what connections were made, what materials came back that we can now implement within the structure of our northern region. But it's always that back and forth assessment.
Thank you. So Stephanie, your own voice, will you put up there in chat about the dynamics of the group?
Hi, sure. Hi, June. Hi, all. I just said that I think sometimes it depends on the dynamic and kind of where the group is in its process and collaboration. Sometimes, if it's just getting started, you may have to spend a lot more time front loading and educating people about why you need to be there and why it's so critical. But also on the other side, the flip side, it may be, okay, they're established and running, and because we're all stretched so thin, even if I'm not there at the table virtually or in person, they still know I'm there as a resource and as an advocate and can reach out to, if I'm not there in that moment. So, but I think you have to be very clear on what you are trying to advocate within that group to begin with. And then at some point assess, okay, if this isn't going anywhere, then obviously it's not an efficient use of my time and bow out. But be clear on why you're bowing out. I've had to do that with some other things. And it's just like, at this time, they're not really listening or taking my suggestions like I think they should. So let them know, hey, if you ever want to come back and revisit this, you know how to find me. But at this point, I'm not going to continue to participate, unfortunately, if that makes sense.
Well, here's what I take away from what you said. In terms of front loading, I think your point is sometimes we have to invest the time up front to establish an infrastructure that makes the group effective. And that does take some front investing time. I mean, groups don't, automatically, they're off and running in that step 10 when they still have to cover steps 1 through 9. So I think your point about investing time in the front loading is really important. And then I think the other point that you made that I think is that I took from what you said is when you bow out, you not only know why you're bowing out, but for me, I would add to communicate to the group why you're leaving, what is not meeting your needs or is not satisfactory in terms of the way the group is engaging. Because I think, it's much like what we do as managers in organizations. We like to have exit interviews with people. So don't just leave, communicate why you're leaving. Did I get that right?
Yes, ma'am. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, good points. Colleen, you had something in chat about a recent invite. Do some work, I think.
Hi, June. Thanks for telling me that you were doing this, and I appreciate seeing all the advocates who are on here. This is really great. I was surprised when I was asked by someone I've known for many years to come and help a new program that's starting up to create a greenhouse and then get children involved from 4th to 8th grades, at that young age, and really encourage them to think about the importance of sustainable agriculture, even to the point of growing in your own backyard, but also how important it is that we eat healthy foods. And there's also an aspect of it about how bees and pollination are so important for plant survival. And so they're teaching these kids this. And this gentleman reached out to me and said, could you come over? And it's just because he knew of my advocacy in St. Louis and elsewhere. And so since I recently retired, I said, sure, I'd come and do it. And I'm really glad I did, because they had already had plans drawn, and we made quite a bit of changes. They won't change the size of the elevator. I'm still advocating that one, but it's been good because these are all people, volunteers from the community where this project is being planned, and they really know nothing at all about disability. So I'm enjoying doing that.
Cool. And to be very transparent, Colleen and I have sat on, participated on a national advisory council together for how many years?
Well, since 2011.
Oh, my word. Anyways, I've learned a lot from that. I've learned a
Yeah.
lot. You know, one of the things I want to reemphasize of learning is one of the things that particular group does that I really love is, and other groups that I've been a part of, is we never let anyone get through their full presentation. You know, it's like, no way, you know, you are not going to talk at us, you're going to talk with us. And, you know, I hope who's ever inviting the speakers, you know, we try and tell them ahead of time, but it's so much more productive. And some people think it's rude. How can you interrupt the speaker? Well, I found if we don't interrupt the speaker, we never get our questions answered. We never get what we're really concerned about addressed. And I've just suffered over many years of having to be quiet while somebody went through a stock presentation that really did not address the concerns that we wanted to have addressed. And I'm too old to be that patient anymore. So, and I hope I communicate to all of you, you don't have to be that patient either.
June, can I just add a little bit to what you're just talking about? June knows, and for purposes of what you're communicating to everybody here, initially we didn't feel like the advice and the listening and things that we were doing with this major US corporation, very major, was being taken seriously. And we had to stick with it rather than walk away from it. And as they began to actually listen to us, they began to take us very seriously and come seek our advice. So I think there's a real element of that when one thing I can say, because I've been around for a long time doing advocacy, is that in the early days, we were not taken very seriously. We were considered rabble rousers and troublemakers. Now people are coming to the disability community and saying, can you help me? Can you give me advice? What should I do about this? How should I think about this? And it's because we've always hung in there with the organizations or the issues that we felt were really significant, that needed our input, and we never give up. And because of that, now, as June is saying, that people are in this big, huge company are coming to us saying, with their presentations, knowing that they're going to get interrupted, knowing that they may not get through it, but they love the fact that we ask substantial questions and help them think about what they're doing, because it affects millions of people with disabilities by what they do.
And Colleen, that brings up another point that I want to really emphasize. You know, I've talked about my frustration with public hearings, one-way public hearings and one-way listening sessions. But my other frustration is the way government solicits our feedback. And this is something that I've felt for many, many years, which is often they give you a document and they say, okay, tell us what you think. Just give us a page number, fill out this Excel spreadsheet, you know, answer these questions. And again, it's one way instead of two-way. You know, in working on the US Access Board for years, one of the things I liked about that experience was when we put out a proposed rule, we had to read all the input that came in, and it had to be commented on in the Federal Register. So you knew if what you said was being not adopted, you kind of sometimes knew why. There was some communication, but I just, you know, when a government says to you, well, read this and tell us what you think, I say, no, tell us what your questions are. Well, what are you struggling with? How can we really be helpful? Don't just say, here's the plan, tell us what you think. It's like, that to me is a form of tokenism, I think. It doesn't work. What do you all think? Sheila?
Remember how to do that. Okay. So I think, first of all, about tokenism, I often find that I'm the only blind person in a space. And I take all the advantage of that I can, but I have multiple disabilities. So it's not as though it's not, I'm not just blind. I can bring a lot more to the table. And if they are too silly to know that, then that's their problem. The other thing is I put something in the chat when we were talking earlier about, and by the way, I'm sorry I had to be late. I was in another important meeting. But I think I know that the digital divide is real, but for me, virtual has made the difference between me being able to do stuff and not. Because I'm vaccinated and everything, but transportation's gotten really worse after COVID and all this stuff. And it's just, if I'm here, like literally I went from one meeting to this one, and I have meetings. There are days when it's all day long, just back to back to back to back to back. And there's no way I could have done that pre-COVID in buses and trains and such. So I think it's important. But I think that we can take what I was going to say too is when they send out these plans and stuff, I can't even process that. Like, let's assume that the document's completely accessible. Let's assume that that's all great and everything. But I'm busy reaching out to all these. I'm an emergency preparedness coordinator at the Center for Independent Living, and I am just trying to tap all the different community orgs that I think we should be connected to and who should know about us and whose constituents will need our services. And I would need some sort of administrative assistant to go through and mark up and give me some cliff notes of this 50-page document. So yeah, I kind of go to them and I go, this, maybe it's accessible, but I can't process all this. Let's have a convo, please. Even if it's offline, let's have a convo. Because then the questions do come out. Because I say something and they say, well, what do you mean by that? And they say something and I say, well, what do you mean by that? And how did that come to be and all that?
Yep, good point. It's just nothing like a good two-way conversation to really go deeper in discovery and really exploring some of the challenges and solutions that really don't come easy to anyone. I wish there was more recognition of, don't give us that 50-page document. Give us your questions and tell us what pages we should attend to really think about, some of the answers to what you're asking. So,
I actually think that we should just say, let's eschew the document and let's have a convo. Let's have a real session. And, I think that they've reversed the Brown Act now where everybody's got to be virtual, and a lot of boards and commissions that have folks with disabilities on them don't have quorums, so they can't do anything. Congratulations. We've been thrown back 60 years. And I know darn well that the purpose of the Brown Act was not to do that to people. And I just hope that that comes back around again. We take care of it. Because
Uh,
it's now hurting us very badly. And the people that actually enjoyed a little summer of summer in a metaphorical sense of having some time to actually get to meetings that they never got to, now they're siloed again. We need to fight for that. Sorry, I'll disappear now.
Cindy, I see your hand, but Sheila, can you just, I'm not sure what you're referring to regarding the Brown Act and some changes. Can you let us know what you mean?
So the Brown Act was amended during COVID so that virtual meetings could happen. And now they've reverted it. And what it now is if you can't be at the physical meeting in person, literally you have to publish the address of where you're going to be attending from. And in some cases, like the Mayor's Commission on Persons with Disabilities in Oakland, you can only, like, this rule can only miss 2 meetings physically, or, you know what I mean? And so it's become very limiting.
Is that,
And
is that a California,
folks,
is that a California law? The Brown
yeah,
Act?
yeah,
Have to,
Brown
and
versus Board of Education. But it's fictional. But now I'm confused. I mean, I've been trying to follow it, and I don't even. Christine Fitzgerald in San Jose would know more. And
okay, I haven't heard about that. That sounds like it's really going backwards.
yeah, it is. It's a problem.
I think a lot of us would be with you in, you know, we can participate much more fully when we don't. When our commute time is a minute or two versus 14 hours on a bus.
Right.
Mm.
That part. It takes me an hour to get across town. So yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to share that you know, I'm not devaluing in-person meetings. I mean, after 3 years, I went to a conference recently where I met with people I've been working with for 3 years in person. And I was so excited. I went around and took a picture with me and each of them, just proving we were actually physically together in terms instead of being in a Zoom box. So it made me remember how nice it was to have a conversation in the bathroom or the bar or the hallway. But nevertheless, I think hybrid is really very important for our community to honor as a not nice to do, but must do. So let's see, we have Cindy, Joanna, and Carolyn, I think. And Cindy Soto, did your hand go down or is it still up or? Okay, we'll come back to you, Cindy. Joanna? And
Hi, yes, thank you so much. I did want to comment on the Brown Act as well, because that is something I'm super passionate about. I'm on, I go to many meetings that people now can't attend because of accessibility issues, and kind of what you were saying earlier, June, about like the investment to invest for some people 5 to 6 hours to go to a 1-hour meeting, that they're not compensated, or you know, they depend on others for transportation and others for helping them get out of their house and things like that. With I currently it's turned into a 2-year bill, and there's the proposed bill is being actually blocked by the media, which is a really interesting thing that I'm hearing is that the media doesn't want people to have access to meetings without being in person. And as far as advisory, so like this affects advisory committees. And I think that we're hoping, because I'm in an I attend other meetings with SECA, and they're hoping that we'll be able to get possibly a different bill if this bill doesn't go through next year, that at least helps advisory committees still be able to meet. But I know Cindy, who just put her hand up, knows more about it than I do.
Okay, thank you, Joanna and Cindy or Joanna. Who's, and not to leave you people who are not in California out. You know, what happened in California sometimes blows your way. So don't feel like you can't listen to this. It could be coming your way as well. Cindy, can you shed more light on this issue, problem, sponsor?
Yes, myself and a few other advocates, Christina Fitzgerald is included. We are working with one of the lawyers at Disability Rights California. And there are two bills that have gone into 2 years. So we'll be able to vote on them, next year. But which we're a little bit happy about, because that way we can have more organizing time. But there is movement on this. And I would say that I'm on 2 different advisory committees, and one of them said we polled the members of the committee, and over half of them said they are not going to return to in-person meetings. They'll just quit. So that is a huge problem. I'm sure it's happening everywhere. Oh, thank you.
Wait, Cindy. So
Yeah.
it sounds to me like this is it's a bill, it's not a law. The law changed during COVID, but the bill is asking that the law be reverted back to only in-person meetings. So but it's not a law yet.
Right. No, right, exactly. Yeah. We're trying to stop the totally in-person requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Carolyn, your hand is up, looks kind of faded.
Hey, June, my comments were just about the Brown Act as well. We appreciated the flexibility of not having to physically be there if we weren't able to be there. But that is all changing. For example, we have some mandatory meetings with grant lines of activities in the Sacramento region. And that is, for all intents and purposes, when it's an all-day meeting in Sacramento, that's an overnight trip for our team. No way around it. That's an overnight trip. We send someone from Redding to Sacramento, a hotel is involved. So for us not to have that flexibility also contributes to the prioritization of what activities are we going to be engaged in and what's worth the bottom line for our grant, for our community. How do we determine to be involved, or like you said, is the seat at the table worth it? Because we're not the kind of agency where we just are looking for a seat at the table to say we're at the table. When we come to the table, we want to be proactive in our participation.
So Carolyn, I want to be clear. The sponsors of, for example, this full-day meeting in Sacramento, is that a choice they're making, that it's not hybrid, that they insist that you be there? Or is it?
It is not a choice. The Brown Act gave concessions during the pandemic lockdown. Those concessions end July 1st. And that is a California-wide restriction now. And so what may be a possible choice are some of the guidelines saying if you miss 2 meetings, you're off of the participation. You're no longer a part of the committee or administrative. That may be an individualized choice based on the committees, for example, because they will set internal rules based on how much they want that proactivity and participation. But the Brown Act itself is no longer going to be allowing that virtual participation without, as was previously stated, you publishing where you're attending from. And in some cases, we still have some of our employees working remotely, which would mean they would be publishing their physical home addresses out there in a public setting. That is never going to happen.
Well, so what you all are saying is this exception to the Brown Act sunsets in California in July, making in-person mandating in-person participation. Is that what you're saying right now? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, depending on what kind of board it is.
Okay.
So like a SELPA, like through the school districts, the CSEs and things like that, non-governing boards, they can still meet on virtually, but boards that are considered governing, even if they're really not, they're really advisory, but they're advisory to local or any kind of governing body, even though they don't really have access to funds in that way, are still not allowed. I mean, in our county, we haven't been able to meet virtually for a few months now. So we just barely made quorum last month for our IHSS advisory committee, for example. But yeah, so.
Well, that sounds a little fuzzy in terms of what the boundaries are. Hey, Virginia, you're from, I don't know if I'll put you on spot or not, but you're from Cal OES, and I participate on a advisory committee for you all. Is this on your radar screen?
I am taking notes because no, it is not. That doesn't mean it's not on our chief's mind, but I'll bring it to his attention as well.
Yeah, it's very disturbing.
Do we know the assembly, the numbers? I have Brown versus Board of Education as being my only notes. Somebody have any assembly or Senate bill numbers we can attach to this? I can find that as well.
Also, you have to see if you're under the Brown Act or the Green Act. I know it sounds confusing, right? So like I mentioned, the SELPAs, for example, they don't follow the Brown Act. So it just depends on what kind of board you're considered. I wanted to say, if you give me a minute, I can give you the numbers. Let me just look it up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, this is a, it reminds me of, in our advocacy life, I often attribute the way we achieve things and make change, kind of like an old game I played as a kid called Chutes and Ladders. You kind of like finally get up the ladder, you think you really achieved a very meaningful change, and then all of a sudden you're falling back down the chute, and all of that progress you made tends to, disappear. And this is what this discussion is reminding me of. So I think we're really going to have to be on top of this one, because and it brings even more importance to our meeting in August regarding hybrid meetings and what's involved and how to do it well, how to do it right, why it's important. Although I feel very confined by Zoom, I, like Sheila, am very grateful that my level of participation is much higher because it's a 2-minute commute, not 14 hours or 5 hours or even 2 hours. Let me take another glance at Zoom. How about the rest of you?
June, can I address something that Joanna Kent said?
Yeah, and before you do, Ron, AB 2449, is that what we're talking about? Assembly Bill 2449 in California, is that what you meant in chat?
Yeah, that's what I saw at least, is AB 2449. That's a change as of January 1st, 2023 for the Brown Act.
Mm.
Can you put that in the chat, please?
Yeah, it's there, the number's there, AB 2449. Ron posted it. AB 2449.
Thank you.
I like this comment. Let's see if I can read it. In chat. Let's see. It says, oh, Todd, you wrote this. Excluding people with disabilities due to physical participation is creating a barrier on top of a barrier. Why am I thinking this sounds like technical redistricting? Cindy.
Thank you. I believe Joanna Kent said that some meetings can be held virtually and others cannot. I'm on an advisory committee, and we called in our county council, and even though we have no control over any money or policy, we just advise the board. The county council said that we can still not meet virtually. So that's in LA County. So that, which was very disappointing to us.
And
So I guess it's different where you live.
what
No, that's very true, because that's a government advisory board, school advisory board.
Okay.
But not like the school board. School board has to meet in person. Advisory to the, it's very layered, and that's why I'm saying it. Some people are not impacted and some people are. It just depends. Anything that has to do with government, 100% they're meeting now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Well, I think this is definitely an advocacy thing we all need to push on and understand the complexities and the nuances, because from what you describe, it's still sounding kind of fuzzy to me. And when something is left up to a lawyer within a jurisdiction for interpretation, that really worries me. In my opinion. So what other kind of things do you all take into account when you're evaluating your participation? What are the elements? And tell us, and when have you left the group? And did you give feedback when you left the group? And Joanna can also put in chat, AB, I think it's AB 817, AB 817. And there's a link in there with the PDF link. So as you think about that question in terms of how you leave, how you stay, how you evaluate impact worth, one of the handouts that I linked in chat was the ladder of citizen participation. And that is a great article that's like 50 years old, but it is really excellent in terms of really shedding light on the different levels of real engagement versus token engagement and how power is denied to people in these groups. So I think it's a great article. It's really short, but definitely it's classic and worth reading about her 8 steps that describe, 3 general forms of power. So any other comments for any of the content or anything else that you want to contribute?
June, it's Todd, and this is something that's not unique to California. I think it's happening across the country. And I think it's an area where the red flags need to be up for people with disabilities. We've suffered the devastation of a global pandemic to get voices that haven't been heard an easier method to being heard. And now there's attempts to take that away. And I think it's because a lot of these folks who don't understand our plight and our challenges don't understand what they're taking away. So I think from state to state and at the national level, we need to get our disability rights folks up to speed with the fact that they are taking away basically a right for people to have a public voice and to eliminate or create a barrier that doesn't need to be there.
And to your point, Todd, I think it's bigger than disability. I think this is a real chance for advocacy coalition.
Oh, yeah.
Because this affects, all the people Carolyn talked about in terms of rural areas and, people who just don't drive and on and on and on. I mean, this is a huge group that this affects. Sheila?
So, thanks. I came in late and maybe you guys covered this, but when we think of things about when I think about the intersectionality of emergency preparedness and being at the table for something, one of the things that I often feel frustrated about is, and this might be opening more than wants to be opened now, but I at least want it out and maybe talked about later, is a lot of the EMS, the emergency medical services, a lot of the first responders, a lot of the fire department folks, police folks, have these other models where it's based on a medical model. And I cynically say sometimes that doctors are like, if they can't cure us, then they just wish we would go away so we wouldn't be a blight on an eyesore because it's a place where a doctor failed. And there's a lot of experiences I've had where, and I've heard screen readers are great except when they're not. There's the medical model doesn't know what to do with us as beings and doesn't know how to value a being that isn't perfect. And I put air quotes around perfect, whatever perfect is. And I think that as we have a whole tsunami of baby boomers popping into older adulthood, seniorhood, whatever the term is. There, we need to think about people, and we need to realize that people are not whatever their disabilities are. And I'm sorry it took me a long time to get there because I got distracted by two different things, my screen reader and then one of my devices thought I was talking to it. So I hope that made sense.
It does, and you're right. Those are very layered issues that we talk about a lot in a lot of different, actually on these calls and a lot of different topics that we've gone deeper on. And so topic of today of what makes for quality participation and, equal participation is something that's really important here, and that you've all uncovered a potential sliding back in time that we'll need to really, tackle strongly, not only from the disability perspective, but joining with a whole lot of others that I know feel the same way about this. It really is a level of huge discrimination, potentially for a wide swath of people. Wide swath. Not just people with disabilities who are a protected class, but people who may not meet any disability definition, but certainly would be totally affected by this, shutting down of an important access to, civic participation.
June, this is Todd. I'm just curious if you could tell me what your feeling is when we're talking about this participation. I've heard a lot in Washington State about the power of getting the perspective of subject matter experts and somebody with lived experience. And I can't help but think that there's been some movement in that area. When it comes to relationship building, to have folks with lived experience. I don't know how you duplicate that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even still understand what that means. So we're still at a level of explaining, how that is so valuable and different than just, choosing one person with a disability as your token disability representative on something, to make sure that there are people with disabilities who don't identify as having a disability or would not talk about their lived experience for a number of oppression related issues. So I think we still have a long way to go in helping people understand the value of, choosing people who are able to talk about the lived experience, and also from whatever perspective the group is looking for input, change, whatever. So, yeah, I think we have a long way to go. And we've made some dents, but, little cracks in the ceiling are not good enough unless they're widened. So anyways, it's 11:05 and it's time to put up the poll. Tell us what you think of this meeting. Put your comments in chat. And I did put the resources in chat so you can, with the links. And so Carla, or you could put up the poll and it'd be great. And as we,
Yes, hold on one second.
I see it up there now. There are 4 questions in the poll, and anybody who can't access the poll, let us know. We'll send you an email copy. In the meantime, any last minute thoughts, questions? Observations?
Just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for the poll should be up momentarily. It was wonderful participation. So with that, it looks like our time is coming to an end. I will also be adding a link to our YouTube channel. Please feel free to check it out for past meetings with different links and information as well.
And I'll put my email here in chat in case anything occurs to you as an afterthought. Feel free to email me. And we'll just leave the poll up for another 2 minutes to capture the few of you who haven't done it yet.
Way, June, I got a copy of, this is a different subject, but I just wanted to thank you. Got a copy of your emergency preparedness for folks who have care providers. Because we're working on a CalGrow's presentation specifically for caregivers that aren't IHSS. And so we have it. I don't know whether we'll use part of it or not directly, but it is informing how we go about figuring this presentation out. So I thought I should let you know that and thank you for it.
Great, let me know. I'm sure there's stuff in there that needs to be updated, so let me know. It's hard to keep things updated, but glad you have it. Feel free to use it. Feel free to share it.
To date, actually, I thought that I could look at it more closely. I wasn't looking at it with an eye about that. I was just getting ideas from it and thinking, what have we not added? And things like that.
Great. Well, thank you all. It's I'll give you back a whole minute of your time, and thanks for doing the poll. Really appreciate it. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, Carla, any way to capture the graphic of this? It's so much easier to read than an Excel spreadsheet.
I just ended up screenshotting it. There's no
Oh, it,
Zoom,
yeah, that'd be
Zoom
good.
will let you save it.
Let me see if yeah, screenshots are good.
I believe Naya's screenshotting it now.
Okay.
If she hasn't done so.
Well, I'm trying, but it's,
Let me see.
I don't know where it's going.
Let's see if I can screenshot it.
You should be able to with the snippet tool. It is a little bit tricky though.
I know I can only get, let me try it. Can only get 3 questions at a time. So let me get my snippet tool. Yeah, so much easier to read this way. Okay.
Agreed.
But then after I snip it, I have to
You'll have to save it and then you just save it to wherever you'd like. You can save it onto your desktop or
yeah, but I have to save each piece. So bear with me 1
Yep.
minute. I have to
No
throw,
worries.
I have to throw it into a Word document here. Okay,
Naya, you weren't able to screenshot it?
got the first part. Now back to the second part.
Yeah, I'm not sure why It won't let me view the poll.
I got it. I'm almost done. Bear with me. See. Copy. What happened? Almost there. Got it. Thank you. Got it.
Okay, now are you all done? I can go ahead and close this out.
I am done. Thanks for helping. How do you say your name?
Naya.
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 I'll probably mess that up, so keep helping me. Naya. So you don't need